Hello and welcome to Seattle City Makers. I'm your host, Jon Scholes. Welcome to our latest episode. I'm joined by Steve Metruck, the Executive Director of the Port of Seattle. He's held that role since December of 2017, and he oversees a massive economic engine for our region and county, a special purpose government responsible for world-class trade, travel, logistics services to one of the most dynamic and one of the fastest growing regions in the U.S. Big presence, obviously, in downtown Seattle, an important partner to the health of downtown and our city and region. Steve oversees a massive labor force that's responsible for our cruise business, commercial fishing, grain terminals, recreational marina, other real estate activities, and of course, SeaTac Airport. Before coming to the port, Steve had a 34-year career in the Coast Guard, retiring as a Rear Admiral and serving as the Chief Financial Officer for the Coast Guard as well. Steve and I talk about the range of businesses and responsibilities that he oversees and that the port is responsible for, his career and background, how he got into the Coast Guard, and then ultimately leading one of the biggest ports in our country, his first job, and his perfect Saturday in Seattle. Hope you enjoy my conversation with Steve Metruck, the Executive Director of the Port of Seattle. Thank you first for making the time for this.
Yeah, and thanks for the invite.
A lot to talk about. I mean, you have such a wide scope in what you and the port do and oversee, and huge impact. And I want to get to all of that and sort of what's going on with cruise in the airport and shipping and maritime. And, there's a lot that's happening, that's happening around the world and around our country that's affecting your lines of business. But I want to start just with your upbringing and which seems where you grew up, your experiences of industry and maritime were early experiences that have really influenced your career trajectory. And I know you grew up in northern New York.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in northern New York, but it's kind of unique because it was located on the border between Canada and the U.S. on the St. Lawrence River.
Yeah.
And the St. Lawrence River is the gateway where all the ocean-going ships would come by. So it was kind of sparked my interest of two things, protection of the environment, but also the interest in that, where these ships were going. And that kind of interested me in a career. And so that attracted me to look into the options. And I looked at different military services, but I also looked at the Coast Guard Academy, and I ended up going to the Coast Guard Academy based on that interest.
And one of your first assignments was, as I understand, a sea engineer on boats looking for drug smuggling?
counter drug operations out of South Texas. It was a different thing back then. We were looking for marijuana, bales of marijuana. bales of marijuana on fishing vessels.
Yeah.
And pulling those over in the Yucatan, off the Yucatan Peninsula.
So you're out on the deck with binoculars, sort of scoping out ships. Is that
we actually carried a small helicopter with us too, but it can tell you how old I am. The same helicopter that we have is now in the Museum of Flight at Boeing. So you know how old
not the
those
exact
ships are.
one, but
not the exact one,
the
but
model.
same type of models. And we would go out and then do drug intercepts on look for vessels to board and do that. Yeah.
Were there any? Are there any particular missions that were exceptionally exciting that still?
I think for me, there was one that you still think about a lot, which was we were tracking a vessel, but on radar, but it would go in and out of into territorial waters of Mexico. And then one night, then we turned off all of our lights, and we tried to sneak in between the ship in the Mexican border, and we turned on all the lights, and then the ship was weaving in and out and actually ran into us, and we ended up firing warning shots in front of it, but the bow of the ship actually penetrated the bow of the Coast Guard cutter I was on. So it resulted in, it was quite a evening, but it was very exciting because usually, because you have overwhelming force, usually the vessels just surrender. But in this case, it was a little more than that. But
was that an intentional maneuver, or they just?
Well, I think they just didn't. Well, once we were upon it, I think we even sprayed them with a fire hose and other things to try to get them to stop, but they didn't stop, and so I think they. I don't know if we're not sure if they did it on purpose, but it did. It was never had a collision on a ship before, so that was exciting.
And you recovered some drugs, I assume.
Oh yeah, it was filled with drugs. Back then, you didn't have to find them. The drugs would be sitting on the decks of the fishing vessel. And it wasn't as, looking for contraband like you see hidden.
Yeah, they made it easy for you.
Or today it could be cocaine or other drugs or hidden. These were, or even today they've morphed, not to talk about the Coast Guard, they've morphed to semi-submersibles running cocaine, that are just below the water line, and those operations. They're much more sophisticated and money towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then your career in the Coast Guard went from sort of on the water to shore-based, and you had a number of roles, I know, in different cities, Tampa, Buffalo.
Yes. Yeah. Buffalo and Tampa and
We've had a
San
number
Diego.
of folks with Buffalo connections on our podcast, so we're glad to add to that constituency. I've got Buffalo roots, so we always have to note that. But you
Go Bills,
Councilmember,
right?
Go Bills, yeah. Councilmember Bob Kettle.
Yes.
We've had Jamila Conley, who just opened a wine bar downtown, so I just had to note that for our Buffalo friends that are listening. Yeah. But you went to the shore from the water side. And what were some of your roles and responsibilities?
Well, it was shoreside operations, which is the multi-mission, in those different ports that I was in, Buffalo and then San Diego and here in Seattle as well. They're shore-based operations where you're looking at, you're doing multi-missions, which is inspecting vessels, U.S. domestic vessels. Any vessel that carries a passenger for hire in the U.S. has to be if it's not a state, then it has to be approved and inspected by the Coast Guard, and you have to have a licensed captain. So that's part of those responsibilities. You looking at foreign vessels coming in for compliance with U.S. and international laws. You have teams that do that. You also do inspection of waterfront facilities, make sure they're in compliance with all federal laws, whether it be hazardous materials or oil transfer and things like that. And then you also are prepared for oil spill response. And so each of those things, and the Coast Guard has coordinates that in the coastal zone for pollution response. And that was a big part of our responsibility.
And you had 34 years in total in your Coast Guard career, left as Rear Admiral, and 7 years or so ago came to...
2016. Yeah. So it was, the other thing that's interesting about my Coast Guard career, I also worked for the State Department for a couple years at the United Nations. I worked for Senator John Kerry on his staff for a few years. I was seconded to his staff for a couple years on the Hill. So it got me to understand a lot about both international relations and about how things get done in Washington.
And that time with Senator Kerry sort of sparked your interest in kind of the public policy side and policy making. And
yes. Yeah, it sure did. Yeah. Of seeing a lot of things about, especially about, a lot of it was fisheries enforcement, but it was environmental protection and focused on that. Yeah. So it was good. And then one of my last jobs was being CFO with the Coast Guard and overseeing both the budget and the execution of the budget for the Coast Guard. So.
And what drew you to this role with the port? I know they had a search firm, and I assume they called you up, but when did they find you? Did you find the role? What happened? What drew you to this role?
One of our best experiences, my wife and I was here from 2005 to 2008 here in Seattle, and it was a great experience for us here. So when I retired in 2016, we were settled back in Washington, D.C., and I was blissfully retired for about 18 months, and I think my wife was looking to get me out of the house. And she said, hey, this job, somebody let her know the job at the Port of Seattle was open. And so I called and inquired, with the recruiting company.
So she brought it to you, huh?
Yeah, she brought it to me.
Nudging you to...
You should see...
How were you spending your retired days?
On DC, we were doing, like most retirees, we were traveling a little bit. But I was... I was serving on a board for the Navy Mutual Insurance Company, which is actually a nonprofit insurance company, and then just doing some consulting on the side.
Were you thinking about wanting another chapter and another gig, or was this prompted by
I think
by her?
Well, I wasn't. I was thinking about that. I mean, it seemed like life was pretty full then. It's surprising how much how much your plate fills with things to do. I wouldn't say I was bored, but it intrigued me with the job because it brought back memories of the great partnerships. And the thing was, when I worked with the Coast Guard here, we had so many great partnerships with the different stakeholders here, including the Port of Seattle, but also the Washington State Patrol. We were working on security for the ferries, pollution response with the Department of Ecology, all the different marine stakeholders that we worked with here. All of those were great partnerships, and it was really that feeling of positive partnerships here that attracted me to apply for the job, and also to get back into government service. Looking at the mission of the port as a special purpose government, and actually doing that, and that really attracted to me, versus a private corporation.
So as you sit here today, and you've got so many different lines of business, from the airport and maritime commercial fishing and recreation marinas, I want to talk sort of about cruise. We'll get to that certainly. But talk about some of the bright spots, the growth, the opportunities in some of those areas, and what are some of the headwinds and challenges? And I know a lot of what's going on at the national level with tariffs and other things are impacting federal spending and grants and things like that will have impacts to your lines of business. But maybe we just start with cruise. And I understand we're well underway with the cruise season, and you're projecting a record year.
Yeah, for a number of travelers, we have 298, which is just below, but that's 298 vessel calls here for the Port of Seattle, and 1.9 million passengers, which is the record on that. So, and also I think this has been a business line. It's nice at the Port of Seattle to have different business lines, so we're a diverse port, and so that proved to be successful, in economic downturns and in those things. And cruise is a great one because it is. There's a lot of resilience in the base, and it bounced back quickly after COVID.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive how strong the return of cruisers have been to those.
Matter of fact, we were early came back in 2021 earlier than any port, because we worked with King County and Seattle Public Health to do that. We worked with CLIA, the Cruise Line International Association, to get that started in 21, and then it came back full in 2022, and that demand for that cruise, that 7-day and 10-day cruise to Alaska, is in a lot of people's bucket lists. So that demand is still there, and we have 3 berths. We're using those more days of the week, and so that's been a great thing for us to use the facilities that we have, and to bring more vessels, and to work with the ports in Alaska. To have those ports of call in Alaska, so it all works as a system. My wife and daughter and my daughter's friend just booked a August cruise for her 16th birthday, so that's what she wanted to do. Oh, fantastic!
So
really?
That's great. Never been to Alaska and wanted to go to Alaska.
It's a great intergenerational.
There'll be 3 of those 1.9 million record passengers.
It's a great intergenerational vacation.
Yeah,
it's a good value for what you have. You have your house. You wake up and you're in a different place, and that's got a lot to say for it. And if you want to do the shore excursions and do a lot of them, you can do a lot of them, or you can do a little of them. Your dining experiences are different, so it can be varied. But it's a great intergenerational
choices and flexibility. Yeah. And you've made some big investments on the shore side to shore power over this last year, which is a big game changer on sustainability and for us, we've made a substantial investment in Pier 66. We were the second port to have shore power for cruise over 20 years ago, when we had it down. First, it was at Terminal 30, and then we moved to 91 through a partnership there. We had 2 berths with shore power there, which means when the ships come in, they can shut down the ships and are not shut those big engines down.
Shut the big engines down and at dock, so you're not producing carbon and you're not producing emissions. So, and that's important to us. And we made the investment to bring shore power to Pier 66 to Bell Harbor in order to allow that same capability. And then interesting in that is that the commissioners. I mean, we're driving working with the cruise industry to move towards more sustainability, and we're the first port to probably have both 3 cruise ship berths operating on shore power, plus 2 berths on the cargo side. So I know a lot of other ports are making major investments, but we've kind of crossed that line first. And it was an undertaking because we had to bring shore power from on a under submarine cable from Terminal 46 south of the
and running
Coleman
up north
dock,
along the
run it through the bottom of the bay to Pier 66, and then get that connection and bring it there. And it was a substantial, about $40 million of investment in order to do that.
And you got it done ahead of schedule. I mean,
we did, yeah. We were discovering that the big electrification, we were delayed a year because it took us a year to get that cable produced and brought to us to do that.
I imagine that's a thick cable.
Yeah. I've seen it's about 10 inches, I would say.
No kidding.
In
it's still amazing. These big old vessels will just like plug in like an electric vehicle. Like it's just one plug and you plug it in and it runs the whole thing, huh?
Yeah, and we've kind of set the standard for that.
Yeah.
Mike Watts from Watts Electric kind of developed here, and that standard has developed in our first work with him, is developed kind of the standard for that in the industry.
Is that his real last name?
His name is Mike Watts.
He was born to be in that business.
Yes.
And we expect more and bigger ships and lines in the coming years.
We have some. Well, this year we're going to get the Cunard line with the Queen Elizabeth will be coming in June 16th, I believe, or in June, and that'll be the first Cunard ship arriving. And then in 2026 we're getting MSC and Virgin Cruises. Now the exciting thing about that is that these are more European-based cruise lines, and with them, they'll attract more passengers, but also tourists from Europe here to the region.
And those are folks we hope will extend their stays and
we know
stay
in
a night
general
or two in downtown on either end of it, and maybe venture out to other places in Washington State.
For sure, we'd like to say their experience. They're attracted on the Alaska cruise side of it, but we like to say that their experience begins here in Seattle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to see and do here in Seattle and Washington State. And so that's we're working with Visit Seattle and to make it all happen.
And that international traveler is more important than ever, particularly with the decline in the Chinese visitor over the last, since COVID, right? We've seen that was such a growing market for Seattle of international travel, and we've not seen it return. And so if we can attract folks from other international markets, that's good for our downtown and city.
And it's interesting because we oversee both the airport as well, and that helps us to see those numbers and know about additional flights and those kinds of things that are coming in.
So let's turn our attention to the airport. I mean, a lot of construction and growth there. It seems busier than ever. What's sort of the current state? What are the major projects and investments? What are some of the challenges?
Sure. We still have, we're I think people know there's construction at the airport, right? That you can see the evidence. But I think any airport in the U.S., because air travel continues to increase throughout the nation. But here, it's still growing for us. We recovered from COVID now, the pre-2019 numbers, and are increasing. But those things you're seeing on right now are really bring us a traveler experience up to a higher level for us.
I was walking by the renderings not too long ago and just really impressed with just the quality of the design and experience that you all are delivering. It doesn't look like the airport of old, an airport of old. I mean, our airports look great for a long, long time. And I think one of the best experiences in the country. And it's like you're taking it to the next level with.
Yeah, we're trying to keep that same standard because we delivered the International Arrivals Facility, which is a world-class facility to arrive. And now we're working on both the arrivals as you're driving in. You can see the drive there. That will be widened in order to allow traffic, and more directing the traffic to get in and get out will be more effective.
Is that one of your primary challenges of just how people are getting in and out of the airport?
Of course, we'd prefer people to take sound transit.
Yep, you got a train going there.
You got a train to get there, and there's actually very easy, to get there from the station right into the. But we have plans for the future, but right now that's a great way to get there, a great option to get to the airport. We're also doing the C concourse, which will be we can't build out in a lot of places, so we're building up, which is building multiple level, 3-level airport dining and retail experience, which you can see it as you drive in, you see it rises up over the terminal, and that's the Concourse C. Delta's doing new lounges, which will have a new experience there in the A concourse to do that. And we're also, people don't see it, but we're finishing our third phase of the baggage system. Baggage systems are like HVAC, where you're investing money.
You don't think about
but
it.
You don't. You want it to work, and you don't want to spend money on it, but you need it. And so that's the same thing with our baggage systems to make sure that those are all connected and working properly. So that's been a multi-year, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. But that's coming.
Has the technology, I imagine it has, around baggage systems evolved quite a bit. And AI enter into the picture there and make it more efficient.
You're seeing more tools and you're seeing more automation and handling of that. Of course, you've got to build in. TSA has to check all the bags when they come in as well. So we're doing a lot of coordination with TSA. And but also that makes me think about Checkpoint 1, too, is going to near completion. So Checkpoint 1 will be down on arrivals where international arrivals come out. And that'll be a new terminal, a new checkpoint that we're adding here. And that should be online here coming up in June.
That's at the far south end of...
It's where international arrivals comes out. And it'll be down on that first floor. And we haven't figured out completely. It may be for more frequent travelers who have pre-check or other things, but we'll see. But it's adding to those numbers of gates. And of course, we're doing that project jointly with Alaska Airlines group to increase the gateway project there for the front of their operations, which will set the standard for that for them.
And looking at international flights in and out of SeaTac, I know we don't have the same level, speaking of China again, that we did pre-pandemic, but on total, where do we sit with the number of nonstop destinations in and out of Seattle relative to pre-pandemic? I know Alaska
we've added more. We've added more.
Tokyo
and I'm
flight.
Trying to think. We just added the Tokyo flight, and then we have 2 more coming, 2 international destinations. The total, I think, is around at least 14. We've added the most number of international flights practically of any hub. Any hub in the nation for international connections. Our co-location between Europe and in Asia has really served us well.
9 hours either way, more or less, right? I mean, we're so well positioned, and it's great to have that connectivity.
For travelers and then for the businesses. We view that as the aviation gateway for the businesses and to bring the travelers that want to come here.
Yeah, I saw a quote from you. It's a little dated, but I think you quoted that there were 1,000 Microsoft employees passing through the airport daily.
Which and those travelers in the
wild number to think of.
And post-pandemic and connecting with those, our number one, we're always looking for new routes, of course, and we're investigating. It takes 2 things. You need to have the planes and you need to have the airlines, and everything's got to come together. But we'll continue to look at that to make Seattle connected to the rest of the world.
And are you looking at? Do you have a perspective on business travel? I mean, that's been a slower segment to return relative to leisure and
domestic travel.
Domestic, and certainly, we see the impacts of that in downtown and hotel demand in the winter and sort of off and shoulder season. But what are you seeing with business travel?
I think it is down a little. It is down a little bit. Domestic travel is the one that's really come back strong. I mean, people, and even as we move into uncertainty, people are sure about one thing. They've made plans. They're following through on those plans. We'll have to see how they make about making future
new
plans.
But
their plans that they're following now, whether it be for cruise or for travel, are pretty strong right now.
And as we see more folks in the office, we see more business travel, and we're certainly seeing continued steady but slow growth in return to office downtown.
Well, we know those demands on certain flights, whether it be to our Helsinki flight is a super. When that service, that's a service doesn't go year round, but that's a really connected service that it's amazing how many people want to connect to these other world capitals to make business happen.
So you mentioned uncertainty and a lot of talk and conversation around tariffs, and how has that already had impacts on the shipping and cargo side? What are you seeing?
Well, as you probably know, we went away from having competing with the Port of Tacoma about 10 years ago. We created a joint venture called the Northwest Seaport Alliance. So that's been great for both ports. We make joint investments and we share the revenues between us. And so that's really handled by the Northwest Seaport Alliance and their CEO, John Wolf, to do that. And but I can say is that prior to the tariffs, business is up year over year for container traffic, and you can see it in the port. It's very busy. Right now, since April 9th, when some of those initial tariffs went into effect, they are they've business. We can expect business to go down, but then expect it to go back up again when the tariffs change again. So it is. There's a little uncertainty what happens again after that because we don't know what's going to happen after the 90 days. But right now, business is happening at the port, and we're starting just to see the ships that would have sailed. The ships that would have sailed, because it takes 2 to 4 weeks for a ship to come here. About those ships, whether they come to the port. Sometimes they don't make a call here and they go on, or what percentage of cargo they'll have. So we'll have to see how that works out in the long run. But it was busy before. Then we can see the dip now, but we'll have to see what happens in the future.
And then the competitive landscape with the alliance between Tacoma and Seattle and who they're competing with up and down the West Coast. Is Vancouver or Long Beach more of a competitor to?
Well, we consider, Long Beach and LA we're not competing with them. They are what they are. But we look at the ports of Vancouver and also Prince Rupert, farther up in the peninsula, is competition for the Seaport Alliance. You want to add value for that, for the cargoes that come here. But again, there's other uncertainty about actions of the federal government in that in that regard too. There's been some proposals we'll have to see if they're followed through on.
And here in Seattle, we've made some recent investments in Terminal 5 and preparing for bigger
ships and also shore power there. But we made the investment in Terminal 5. You have on-dock rail, which makes it really connected. It makes it a great terminal, one of the best terminals on the West Coast.
Yeah.
So,
and the port also owns other real estate around the region
we operate,
and city.
Yeah,
and
we like to say we touch everyone's lives. They just don't know it. Whether they travel on a cruise ship or they travel through SEA or they buy something from Amazon. There's a good chance it touches that, or by seafood, or somebody's family's employed by them as well. So we support the North Pacific fishing fleet through Fisherman's Terminal. And we make a lot of investment in that. So those ships that go either offshore fishing, coastal fishing in Washington, or go up and shift off the coast in Alaska, is that they have facilities to come back and make repairs and do that. And that goes from the smaller fishing vessels to the larger fishing vessels. The smaller ones being at Fisherman's Terminal, which is a great place to go down and visit and have a bite to eat in the restaurant there at Chinook's and take a look around. Or you can at Terminal 91, where we alternate cruise ships and the larger commercial fishing vessels there. So, and we have to build that's major investment. We're just rebuilding berth 6 and 8, which sounds boring, but that large investment is generational to make sure that those facilities are operating for another 50 years there.
Yeah, a lot of jobs and economic impact wrapped in all of that.
It's a multiplier throughout the region. I like to say, just on different numbers, the cruise ship alone has $900 million impact on the region.
Yeah.
And we're just completing our most recent integrated survey of both the airport, the seaport, the Northwest Seaport Alliance. We don't have those numbers yet, but preliminary looks like those numbers are going to continue to increase in the number of jobs that we provide and the opportunities that we provide.
We should mention too, you're a big owner of real estate downtown, including Centennial Park, and want to mention thank you all for the partnership that we've had with the port and the city and a couple of major philanthropists to make improvements and investments to really extend the waterfront park up north through
LA
your
Bay
property.
Connector
LA
project.
Bay, it's been great, and you all have been terrific. And a year from now or so, it'll all be done, but under construction now, and great enhancements for the public to take part in.
Yeah, it'll be great. I think for us, we have a great partnership both with Friends of the Waterfront Park and with the aquarium, and making investments in them as well. So we view that, that connecting to the waterfront. That's part of. We also operate parks as well, and other parks throughout the region, and we continue to make those investments in those parks.
Then you mentioned Pier 66 earlier, which is just a great space and gem and set of food and beverage and event spaces that are just tremendous for downtown.
We actually like to say, the top of Pier 66. Pier 62 is fantastic, but the best view of Pier 62, we think, in the overlook is from Pier Pier 66.
Yeah, you sort of had the original Overlook Walk with with Pier 66.
We like to say we began the waterfront redevelopment 30 years ago.
That's right.
When we developed Pier 66, the Bell Harbor Conference Center. And actually, we're exploring how we can make connections on our own property, including that, to have the public more access to that.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about that from somebody earlier this week, actually, that was talking about some of the things you're thinking about at Pier 66.
To make it more connected to that whole waterfront experience for both visitors and then for residents as well, to connect that whole thing. Because we see there's a lot of interconnectivity between Centennial Park and Ella Bay Connector and just the waterfront plans.
Yeah,
along there.
I walked most of the whole stretch yesterday morning.
Oh, nice.
I hadn't been down for a little bit, and it's so impressive. Yeah, what a great new public space for our city and region. So you do so many. You all manage so many different business lines and very different and distinct. How do you as a leader align everybody around one mission and create one culture when you've got people doing very different things around the county?
Yeah, I think it's for us. We try to align our values, and we have a value-oriented organization. Again, it goes back to us being a special purpose government, but it's really delivering on that. Operating our gateways efficiently, and we like to call it the triple bottom line too. Which is succeeding in our different business lines, doing it in the most sustainable way possible, but also creating economic, equitable opportunity. And making those things work. And people know that's what we're trying to do. And so we kind of do that effectively. But for us, we have a North Star too, which is our century agenda, which is approved by the commission, which lays out our goals, our North Star that we're always driving towards, those different goals. And so if we align on those, it helps our business lines deliver on that as well. So they kind of know that we're working on those things, that it's not we're not thinking about sustainability as a sideline. It's part of what we do. So we try to align those things, but it is it's nice. It's nice to have different business lines that you can look at. So it is a little challenging. You're switching from one thing. It's a different thing, different stakeholders, but it's the same type of work. It's just different stakeholders in those different business lines.
And you noted equity. I know equity and your commitments around diversity have been a big part of your leadership, not just at the port, but really throughout your career. What was motivating and inspiring to you around committing to those values?
Well, I think for me, because it's just the right thing to do. It feels the right thing to do. That's why it was good alignment for me to come back to an organization with a triple bottom line, which is something I really believe in. But I think it's also because it's just good business, because having a diverse business and thought and making decisions has been proven to make good decisions. And it really helps just your business be able to do that. And for me, making sure removing barriers. We want to hire the best people to do that, and we just want to remove barriers to entry for both, whether it be businesses or whether it be people wanting to have employment at the port. It's just things that really work for us.
Going back to the airport quickly and just airport capacity in our region.
Yeah.
For folks that aren't paying close attention to that, where does that conversation stand around how we prepare for the future for folks coming in and out of the Puget Sound?
Yeah, great question, John. Right now we're making, over the next 5 years, we're making $5 billion of investment at the airport, but that's to increase the experience. But I think what you're talking about is our Sustainable Aviation Master Plan, which is our plan of over 30 projects that's under environmental review right now. But the big thing for that would add a new terminal with 19 more gates, which would be our biggest increase in capacity. Now, we view that as important to serve the region, because if we don't grow those gates, we will continue to grow, but it will be a different experience. Like, you'll have to wait to get a gate. There may be more hard stands, and you could constrict your operations, and people will have a worse experience. So these projects and this expansion will give us 19 more gates, and that will take us over 60 million passengers, 62 million.
So the runway capacity we have is sufficient, obviously, if you're adding gates.
Yes.
So we've got excess runway capacity with what
right.
we've got.
It's more limitation on the gates and to have the operations. And in the airlines, it's a mixture of different aircraft for loading. Wider bodies can fit more people on. We'll continue to manage those, but the additional gates, those 19 new gates, will give us, and that new terminal will give us more processing capability as well to put people into the system. People probably know we're one of the most constrained, if not the most property constrained major airport in the nation. There's a few others that are feeling the same way, but we're not like Denver or some of these major airports that have all the room in the world. Keep spreading out. Yeah. We are constrained within that footprint, and we have to be very smart. But we think this is the plan, which is undergoing environmental review right now. We hope to have that later on this fall in order to go to the next stage. Once environmental review is finished and we have the final EIS, and then we can work from there, then we'll come up with the individual projects in order to fulfill that vision going forward. So that's where kind of in the process right now.
Do we need another airport in this region? Do we need another airport in the state? What's your perspective?
For us, we're open to having conversations. We don't view, let me just say this, is that we don't view any development of like a Painfield or Boeing even really is that's not competition. We're all serving the region in the state. Yeah. And so we are dedicated to helping out and optimizing what we have within our restrictions. But we think after that $62 million, our growth potential is limited to do that. So you can just do the math and say the state needs another
at some point,
airport.
Right?
Yeah, you're going to need that if you don't want to be constricted in the economic opportunities.
And Boeing just announced some service.
There's a private service, I think, that flies
down to Portland. That's right.
Yeah.
That they're bringing back or was
and I think
that
and I think Snohomish County is looking at expansion of Painfield as well.
Right, which has been a good option.
If it works for people, but we know right now a lot of people throughout the state depend on SEA to go where they want to go.
Yeah. Well, you all have done a fabulous job in running it and the experience. I just love flying out of there. You come back to it and you appreciate what a great airport we have relative to.
Well, I appreciate that.
To many others.
I like to say sometimes I always I look at every airport when I travel.
Yeah.
And of course, it's like how far people, people have some thoughts about connections and doing that, but the distance to get from where you want to go is so short compared to other major airports. That's an interesting metric that I hope people look at.
I had a red eye to Chicago a couple Sundays ago with a connection to Cleveland, and I had like 15 minutes to make it, and it was a hustle. Made it.
Yeah.
I refuse to run. I'll speed walk, but I won't run. But it was a hike. But I did make it.
Yeah. But our connections in doing that you can make those connections pretty.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things too. I mentioned another project we're looking at, which is not that it's not a great 1970s experience in the South Concourse where you come in, but we're looking at upgrading that and trying to see, again, bring that to the same standard that we're looking at there.
Is there an airport around the country, around the world that really stands out to you as a gold star?
Well, we are. I mean, we have
other than SeaTac, of course.
Yeah.
But is there one that?
They are. I mean, you travel internationally, and they're what we call they're a different level because they invest far more than they could probably get in return for those. An
experiential
experience. Yeah.
Singapore
is an incredible one, and South Korea is the next Busan's and I mean, Seoul.
What do you think of what Portland has done recently?
It's a great experience there.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. We have a couple of questions we conclude with that are standard, Steve. The first is, what was your first job where you took a paycheck? Was it in the
it was in the water.
Yeah, I imagine.
I was a lifeguard on the the town where I grew up in the Messina Town Beach. I was a lifeguard there. Yeah.
You've always been
connected
and taking a paycheck from the water.
Yeah, I was connected to that.
Did you have to make any rescues?
Did not on that lake. I did not. The river, I did not make any rescues.
Yeah, and being a lifeguard,
but I was trained and I was ready to go.
You were ready, of course. That's better than the pool lifeguard gig, I think, where you're just yelling at kids not to run all day. I did that for a summer.
Yeah,
I had one mini rescue. I think they would have been fine. But the rest of the time, you're just yelling at kids to not run.
Oh, and it's telling them.
But you can run on the river, no one cares, right?
You can run on the beach, and you can say, stand up. And that usually solves a lot of problems sometimes.
To see if they're struggling or not. Yeah. And then our final question is, what's your perfect Saturday in the Seattle area? If you can kind of design it from morning till night, what are you doing?
Well, I'm a resident of West Seattle, so it's related to the water again.
Can't keep you out of the water.
Yeah, my wife and I love open water swimming. So,
I've heard this, and you swim off Centennial Park sometimes too, right? By your offices, or is that?
I haven't done that. I swim usually West Seattle, either on Alki Beach or on the other side, depending on the conditions there, and swimming off there.
Are you doing this year round?
Yeah, year round. So we love to do that year round, and it's great.
Wetsuit?
No. So I don't swim with a wetsuit. My wife likes to swim with a wetsuit. Sometimes I'll wear neoprene shorts. Yeah. Sometimes.
How long are you out there?
Between 35 and 55 minutes, depending on that. So it's a.
So you start your Saturday.
You start your Saturday. Get up. You start your Saturday with a swim, and you're kind of really super energized with that. And then you think you deserve to have a nice brunch. It would be nice to go out.
You sure do.
Someplace there on.
It's a lot of calories you're burning, just not getting hypothermia.
Yeah, and you be someplace there on Alki to do that. Yeah. And then usually it's trying to get around to someplace else in the region. I should say one of the things we're planning, is a bike ride. There's a great bike ride where you can do, where you can go around. You can go Vashon to Southworth. I mean, from Fauntleroy to Southworth to Bremerton, and then back to Seattle, and you can kind of make that loop and have a lunch over in Bremerton and ride the ferry back. And then it would be perfect to see watch the sunset from the overlook in downtown Seattle, because that's a spectacular to see, that kind of a venue. And I like to see it now on the overlook and on the steps. People gather there for sunset, and that's a pretty spectacular view there.
Yeah, that sounds like a terrific day. An exhausting day.
A lot of weekend warrioring, I think.
Good for you, though. You're in the right place for it. Well, thanks, Steve, for making time for this. I know you're busy.
Yeah.
Busy
Thank
guy.
you, Jon.
And we appreciate you giving us some insight of some of the great things that are happening at the port and some of the headwinds that you're all trying to contend with. And thanks for what you and your team deliver each and every day around economic impact and jobs, and a great experience for those of us coming in and out of here, whether it's on a boat or on a plane or in some other way.
Great. Thanks, Jon. And thanks for all you're doing. So thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Steve Metruck. Appreciate him making time to come on Seattle City Makers, and appreciate his leadership of an incredible economic engine in our region and for our state. The Port of Seattle just put out an economic report. It's worth highlighting a few of these eye-popping numbers. The port's lines of businesses supported almost $39 billion in total business output across our state, 200,000+ jobs, and $400 million in total fiscal impact to the state. So a really, really important economic engine for our city, region, and state. So thanks to Steve for his leadership and for coming on. I want to close out with a recommendation of something you got to check out in downtown Seattle. Got a new Tom Douglas restaurant for you that's being run by his daughter, Loretta. Mr. Fish at the north end of the market, 2010 Western Avenue. It's a fish and chip spot with some great chowder, and it's got a nice little write-up. Recently in the Seattle Times, one of 6 restaurants on the waterfront they recommend checking out. So go check out MrFish.com. North end of the Pike Place Market, it's fish and chip season. I don't know when it's not fish and chips season, but with this blue sky and great weather, it's definitely fish and chip season in Seattle. Thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Seattle City Makers, presented by the Downtown Seattle Association with support from James Cito and production by Thread Theory.